and welcome fellow bookworms and film fans. This week's episode we will be looking at Caging Skies, which is a book by Christina Lewins. Sorry if I say her name wrong, you know how I am with names. It was published in 2008 and it was then made into the film JoJo Rabbit that was released in 2019. Now I will be looking at four things. I will be looking at the plot, I'll be looking at how good the film is, how good the book is, and overall how everything fits together basically. Now, do bear in mind that obviously I will be discussing the book and the film in its entirety, so there will always be spoilers within this episode. So we'll start off with the plot. Now the plot of the book and the film, I realised very quickly, are almost two completely different narratives. But we'll go forward and see how much we can sort of like compare and contrast between the two. So the book starts with more of JoJo, sort of like he's growing up, and you see both his parents and his grandparents. His sister still does pass away, but you understand why she passed away and what she passed away of. It was diabetes. But the film starts with JoJo getting ready to go off to training camp for the Hitler Youth. He's got his mum, his dad is away fighting somewhere, his sister is still passed away, but there's no grandparents anywhere near him. Now, that's sort of like a big difference, because you'll see that during the film, he becomes alone, whereas in the book, he's always got someone around him. So the book has a bit more of his life outside of the Hitler Youth. The book has a bit more of sort of like his childhood as well. It has a lot more sort of like his interaction with his parents and his grandparents. The film is sort of like it's more sort of like you see him and he's in the Hitler Youth, and then you see the consequences and you see him grow as a person. But you also see in the book as well small ways that JoJo's parents are defying Hitler, and in the film you kind of get a feeling that his mum is defying Hitler, but you don't really gauge how much so until a very unfortunate part, which I will discuss. So in the film, JoJo goes straight to the camp basically. It starts off with him going off to this camp, and it's run by someone who could no longer fight because he got invalided out of the army. But it also seems like this person that can't fight almost seems to be disillusioned now with Nazi Germany, because he realises that he's no longer able to help his country. He's now looking after the children basically. Do apologise, got a bit of a cough there. Now, at one point, JoJo gets told to kill a rabbit, and he can't do it. He's staring this is in the film by the way, he's staring at the little rabbit and he can't do it. So then he gets the nickname JoJo Rabbit, and he runs off crying, and Hitler, who's his imaginary friend, played by Taika Waititi, fantastically done, had me laughing so often, goes off and sort of like helps him through this. Now, it is a lot bleaker in the book. Don't get me wrong, it's still a good book, but he loses his best friend through an air raid, and then moves on to the barracks with the other children and the other Hitler Youth, and then because of that he sort of like becomes helping them with like the anti-aircraft guns and things. And in the film it's more comedic, and as I said, you see Hitler as JoJo's best friend and imaginary friend, and they go through life. And there's one line where it goes, where they find out that there's a Jew living in their attic, and JoJo goes, "We shall negotiate," but Hitler turns around and goes, "We'll burn the house down and blame it on Winston Churchill." And it's little things like that sort of make you chuckle, and at such a bleak situation basically. Now in the film, he gets his injuries from a grenade that he wanted to prove that he's a man, so he runs out, grabs this grenade, throws the grenade bounces off a tree and hits him, and he's lucky to get away with the injuries he does. He ends up with a few scars on his face, scars down his side, but he's relatively okay. He becomes a little bit disfigured, but apart from that he's relatively alright. In the book, he's maimed by an air raid, and it is a lot more significant. He loses an arm for one, and it's sort of like he's described as like a part of his face is almost missing, so it's almost grotesque to look at. And I think this is a big difference. I can understand why they probably didn't go down that route for the film, because I think they were trying to make it a bit more comedic, but in regards to sort of like the book, it is very dark in regards to that. So in the book, he is housebound, and while he's housebound, he starts to suspect that there's something going on within this house. His mum's acting strangely, his dad's acting strangely, only his grandma doesn't seem to realise what's going on because she's a crazy old woman, apparently. But because he's very brainwashed by Hitler and the Hitler Youth and the Nazi Germany, his parents don't let him in on the fact that there is somebody else living with them, shall we say. So in the film, he's only home like a short while before his mum goes, right, we're getting you out of here. You're under my feet all the time. And goes and basically beats up the guy that was in charge of the camp and says, you're going to give my son a job. It's your reason that he's disfigured. And he does. Which is really sweet of him because he didn't have to. I was a little bit, he was probably a little bit scared, but he did. Now, when JoJo finds the Jewish girl in the film, she's very vicious. She takes his knife, she basically beats him up, and then he slowly wants to sort of like learn more about her. He goes and inquires to sort of like the Hitler Youth and goes, if I found like a Jew, like what would you do, and like who would be in trouble, and you know what are they like? And then he starts writing this book about sort of like the Jewish population. In the book, Elsa seems more timid. She seems older, but then we find out that Jojo's around 17, which he definitely isn't in the film. But he is in the book. But he falls for her first. However, in the film, he's still quite young, and it takes him a bit longer to fall for this girl. Now, in the book, his mum and his dad become agitated as it goes on because they realise that obviously there's not much that they can get away with, and they realise that, you know, if they don't do something soon, the possibility of them being caught out is very high. And they've got this little Hitler Youth at home. Basically, well, he's not little anymore, he's 17, this big Hitler Youth at home. And they start worrying, they start panicking. But in the film, his mum always just seems calm. She seems like a very happy person. She's always dancing. She was always trying to, you know, make Jojo feel a little bit happy about himself. She's just a really lovely person. It's what you want every sort of like mum to be like. Now, in the book, during an air raid, Elsa comes out of hiding with the flashlight, and that's what brings people to their door asking questions about why there was a flashlight in the upstairs window during an air raid when it's supposed to be a blackout. Jojo tells them he left his flashlight on, they leave, that's sort of the end of that. Now, in the film, people just come to the door. We're not entirely sure why. I think we find out later, you know, sort of like what pushed them to come to the door. But they just start checking the house, and then Elsa pretends to be his sister to get out of trouble. So I don't know why no one would know that Jojo's sister is dead, why they wouldn't know that, but he then goes away, and they actually get helped by the person that was sort of like Jojo's in command, that basically let him run away with a grenade, because he looks at the passport, realises that that's not who she says she is, but doesn't say anything anyway, which is absolutely fantastic. But then it's so in the book, his dad gets put into a work camp, and his mum is hung, which then leaves him with his grandma. In the film, there is that. In the film, you sort of see him picking up like scrap metal. He follows this butterfly, and then it lands on these shoes, and you know they're his mum's shoes. And they never quite show the full body, but his reaction that his mum has just been hung. And I think that's why they came and checked the house to see if there was anything else, because they probably already had her in custody. So at this point now in the film, Jojo is alone. In the book, he's still got his grandma, but he's now having to look after his grandma and look after Elsa as well. Elsa doesn't exist in the real world because obviously she's a Jew in Nazi Germany. So he's got to try and look after two people, one of whom doesn't exist in his house, and it proves to be a big burden for him. So in the book, Jojo finds out that the war is over, but he never tells Elsa, because he tells Elsa that Germany won and the rest of the world lost. Okay, now the film ends when the Allied forces occupy the village. So Jojo goes back. As he's going back, he gets caught by a Russian. He gets pulled in because he's wearing a German jacket. the Russian's going to kill him, but then the commander again, fantastic guy, saves his life again by basically turning around and pretending that he's a Jew and pushing him away and sacrificing himself so that JoJo can survive, which I think was very lovely. But then JoJo goes back, is going to tell her that Germany won. Well, he does tell her that Germany wins, and then realises that actually that's not a nice thing to do. So he tells her they didn't win, and then they go away, and the last scene is sort of like them dancing, and that's a nice happy ending. The book, however, goes on. So JoJo Street is occupied by the French, and he hasn't told Elsa for the fear of leaving him. He's keeping life going, but he's also keeping the lie going, and upon feeling guilty, he decides to try and look for her family and her fiancé, all of whom are dead and have been dead for years. Now, he gives her paints and still insists that she stay inside, but then his grandmother passes away, so now it's just her and him. And he cannot keep up with the bills, so he ends up having to sell the house, and they move into a little flat somewhere else. Elsa is becoming more uglier, more manipulative towards JoJo. JoJo's becoming sort of like in a state of depression. He now has to resort, as I said, to selling the house, selling everything in the house and moving somewhere else. They move into a flat, and he still pretends that she doesn't exist, and it sort of ends with she finds out the truth. She leaves him, and he's just sat there waiting for her to come back and realising that he has to go and find her. It's a very bleak book and a very bleak ending. So, as I said, the plot is vastly different. Now, the book is very bleak. Very bleak. And they introduce characters in the book that we never see in the film. But then they also introduce characters in the film that we never see in the book. So, the fact that the film ends sort of like halfway through the book, but the book continues, and it continues with, I think the second half of the book I found a bit repetitive, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So due to the fact that the both narratives are very completely different, even though I enjoyed both, I will give it a 4 out of 10. Now, the film. I loved this film. It is such a sweet film. It's quite funny, and honestly, the ideas of Taika Waititi, as I said earlier, as Hitler is absolutely hilarious, and he plays it so well. Now, I love his films. I find him a funny director. The film itself was very heartfelt, but still had little parts that make you laugh, like burning down the house, as I said, and blaming it on Winston Churchill. Now, it deals with the idea of the Hitler Youth in such an original way, in the fact that, you know, these kids are being brainwashed, and they are being brainwashed, and the fact that until they meet somebody that's not a Nazi and not a German, they don't realise quite how brainwashed they really are. And it still keeps the heartfelt moments. It still keeps when, you know, he finds her and he looks after her, and then when you know, the mum gets hung and passed away, and it still deals with those little moments. And when he sacrifices himself for JoJo, you still get that feeling, and you still go, oh, because even though you know Germany loses, and you know they lose, you don't want them to lose just for their little characters, which I think is brilliantly done. And honestly, I would recommend this film to absolutely anybody. I really would. The trailers didn't do it justice. It was funny, it was heartfelt, it made me cry, it made me laugh. I would give it a 10 out of 10. 100% a 10 out of 10. Now, the book, I did love the start of the book. I loved the majority of the book. But as I said, the second half of the book, I think, got a little bit monotonous, a little bit sort of like repeating itself. The fact that, you know, that it spent ages sort of like, I'm not going to tell her, but I should tell her, but she doesn't know. And then when they move, and then she's getting sort of like uglier and fatter, and she's becoming more manipulative and everything. At one point, I thought she was just imaginary. I thought that maybe he was making it up in his head. And then the ending itself, where he's just sat there waiting for her to come back. And I don't know, I feel like that's... I didn't quite like that ending. I felt like it felt like a bit of a cop-out, really. But the majority of it is really good, and I do love when he changes from like a love-struck little boy to an obsessed older man, and the fact that he's still trying to sort of like look after his family, and he realises that Nazi Germany and Hitler and everything isn't what it is supposed to be. And I would still recommend this book, because despite the last few chapters or so, I think that the book itself did hold a very good story within it. If you can put up with the last few bits, go for it. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 if I recommend the book or not. Now, overall, the characters are very different. The setting is the same, but the plot is a very different story. And although I think I did enjoy the film probably more than I enjoyed the book, overall, what the film takes from the book, the film is more comedic than the book. The film introduces characters, the film sort of like cuts off at a certain point before the end of the book. So overall, I think it gets like a 5 out of 10 from me. Now, as I said, these are always my own opinions. If at any point you disagree with anything I'm saying, do leave it below in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well so that you can be alerted on my next video. Now, join me next time for my contented narrative around... Around The Outsider. That was it. Had a bit of a brain melt there. So my contented narrative around The Outsider. Now, if there are any book to film adaptations you'd like me to take on, do have a look below in the comments or drop me a message and I will happily do it for you. But till then, remember to always keep it contento.